Victoria Ashford's hands trembled as she stood before the floor-length mirror in her bridal suite, the $15,000 Vera Wang gown clinging to her like a beautiful lie. Through the window, she watched a black Rolls-Royce Phantom glide to a stop below. Her breath caught. She'd invited Marcus to humiliate him, to watch him sit alone in the back row while she married Richard Crawford, a man who embodied everything Marcus wasn't: wealthy, connected, white. The car door opened. Marcus stepped out, and her champagne glass slipped from her fingers, shattering against marble. He looked magnificent, confident, peaceful, whole. Then Elena emerged, radiant in red. Victoria's knees buckled. But the final blow came when three small boys in navy suits tumbled out, their brown skin glowing in the Atlanta sunlight, their laughter carrying up to her window. "No," she whispered. "He has children." 3 of them, which meant she'd been wrong about everything. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. 10 years earlier, Victoria Ashford hadn't been the ice queen standing in that bridal suite. She'd been different, softer, hungry for something her family's pharmaceutical empire couldn't buy. At 32, she was already vice president of Ashford Pharmaceuticals, groomed since birth to inherit her father's legacy. Charles Ashford's voice echoed through her childhood like a prophecy. Ashford women marry power, produce heirs, protect the bloodline. Her grandmother's cautionary tale hung over the family like a ghost. Cast out for being barren, she'd died alone in a county hospital, her name erased from family records. Victoria met Marcus Johnson at a foundation event where he'd come to pitch his vision for affordable housing. She'd expected another slick presentation, another man looking for her family's money. Instead, she found a 6'2" architect from Southside Chicago, whose hands were calloused from construction work, whose eyes held no calculation, only conviction. He spoke about dignity, how every family deserved a home that didn't feel like a punishment for being poor. While other board members checked their phones, Victoria leaned forward, captivated. "You don't just design buildings," she told him afterward. "You design hope." He'd smiled, really smiled, and said, "Even powerful people need hope sometimes, don't they?" That simple question cracked something open in her. Within weeks, they were inseparable. He cooked for her in his tiny apartment. Nothing fancy, just honest food made with care. She'd never had someone ask about her day and actually listen to the answer. When she confessed her fear of becoming like her father, cold, calculating, empty, Marcus took her face in his hands and said, "Then don't. Be Victoria, just Victoria, that's enough." Her mother Eleanor refused to attend their wedding. "He's beneath you," she'd hissed over the phone. "A nobody with a nothing degree from a nothing school. You're throwing away your legacy for what? Love?" She'd spat the word like poison, but Victoria hadn't cared. For 2 years she didn't care. Marcus made her laugh. He saw her, not the Ashford name, not the trust fund, not the corner office, just her. They danced in their kitchen at midnight. They talked about building something together, a family, a future, something real. Then came year 3, and the questions started. "When are you giving me grandchildren?" Eleanor would ask at every family dinner. The board members' wives would touch her arm sympathetically, their pity sharp as knives. And the nursery Marcus had lovingly painted stayed empty month after month, while Victoria's hope curdled into something darker. The unraveling began in year 3, so subtly that Marcus didn't notice until the warmth had already drained from their marriage. Victoria stopped meeting his eyes across the dinner table. She'd come home later and later, her explanations growing terser. Board meeting, client dinner, strategy session. The tulips he left on the kitchen counter each week wilted untouched. The real poison started with the monthly ritual. Every 4 weeks, Victoria would emerge from the bathroom, her face a mask of controlled devastation, holding another negative pregnancy test. Marcus would try to hold her, but she'd stiffen in his arms like he was a stranger. "I'm fine," she'd say, her voice flat. "I just need to be alone." When the doctor suggested fertility testing for both of them, Victoria's reaction was swift and sharp. "It's probably just stress from my schedule," she'd insisted, her hand already reaching for her phone, dismissing the conversation. Marcus had pressed gently. "Vic, maybe we should both get checked, just to know what we're dealing with." Her eyes had flashed with something he'd never seen before, contempt mixed with fear. "Why?" "So you can confirm what we already know. The Ashford women have been having babies for generations. My mother had 3 daughters. My grandmother had 4 children. My great-grandmother had 6. The problem isn't me, Marcus." He'd backed down, confused and hurt. But the seed was planted, watered by Eleanor's weekly visits. Victoria's mother would sit in their living room like a judge on a bench, her presence alone an indictment. "8 years, Victoria," she'd say, loud enough for Marcus to hear from his office. "8 years you've been married, and still nothing. The board is starting to wonder if you made a mistake in judgment." By year 5, the intimacy between them had withered to nothing. Victoria slept in the guest room, claiming his snoring kept her awake. She stopped cooking the elaborate Sunday dinners they'd once prepared together. When Marcus suggested adoption, her response was vicious. "I need my own child, Marcus. My blood, the Ashford heir. Not some random child you picked out because you can't give me what I need." The words hung between them like a guillotine blade. Marcus started spending more time at his small architecture firm, pouring his pain into designs for affordable housing projects that kept getting rejected by corporate clients. He'd come home to find Victoria sitting in the dark nursery he'd painted years ago, staring at the empty crib they'd bought in hopeful anticipation. When he'd try to talk to her, she'd walk past him as if he were invisible. Year 6 brought the fertility clinic. Victoria went alone, refusing his company. "This is my body, my medical history. I don't need you there." The doctor's words had been clear. Slightly diminished ovarian reserve, but still capable of conception. Not impossible. Just harder. But Victoria heard only what she wanted to hear. In her mind, the test confirmed it. She could have children. Therefore, Marcus must be the problem. She never showed him the results, never discussed what the doctor actually said. Instead, she began a campaign of subtle cruelty that ate away at their foundation like termites. At company events, she'd introduce him as "my husband" with an emphasis that made it sound like an apology. When colleagues asked about children, she'd smile tightly and say, "We're still trying." But her eyes would slide to Marcus with accusations he couldn't defend against. The breaking point came at the company retreat in year 8. Marcus had come along, feeling increasingly out of place among the pharmaceutical executives in their designer suits. He was standing near the bar when he heard it, a board member's voice pitched to Carrie. Maybe if Victoria's husband were more capable, she'd have an heir by now. Perhaps she should have chosen differently. The table erupted in uncomfortable laughter. Marcus's stomach dropped, but the real knife came when he looked across the room and saw Victoria. She was laughing too, not uncomfortably, not defending him, just laughing, like the joke was on him and everyone knew it, but her. That night, she came home drunk, and the dam finally broke. Marcus was in the kitchen, mechanically washing dishes, when she stumbled in. The scent of expensive wine preceded her like a warning. 8 years, she said, her words slightly slurred but her intention crystal clear. 8 years, Marcus. Do you know what they call you behind my back? My diversity hire husband. My charitable mistake. The man I married to prove I wasn't like my father, and look where it got me." Marcus set down the plate carefully, his hands beginning to shake. "Victoria, you've been drinking." "Let's talk about this tomorrow." "I've been thinking," she continued, advancing on him. "Thinking about how I had a 5-year plan, then a 10-year plan. Now it's been 8 years and my nursery is still empty because of you." "We don't know that," Marcus said quietly, his voice breaking. "We don't know whose, if anyone, if there's even a medical reason. Please, let's see a specialist together, both of us, as a couple." Victoria laughed, bitter and sharp. "I don't need to see a specialist, Marcus. Look at me. Look at my family tree. My sisters between them have 4 healthy children. My mother had 3 daughters without a single complication. My grandmother, my great-grandmother. The Ashford women are fertile. The math is simple. The problem is obvious. You're saying I'm—" Marcus couldn't finish the sentence. The words stuck in his throat like broken glass. "I'm saying you can't give me what I need," Victoria said coldly, turning away from him. "And I can't waste another year waiting for a miracle that's never going to happen. I won't lose my position as CEO because I was fool enough to choose love over legacy." She threw the divorce papers on the kitchen table between them, and Marcus stared at them like they were written in a foreign language. "Sign them," she said. "And Marcus, don't expect anything. No alimony, no settlement. You came into this marriage with nothing but a dream and a drafting table. You'll leave with exactly that. It's more than you deserve after wasting the best years of my life." Marcus's tears fell on the papers, smudging the ink. "Victoria, I love you. Doesn't that mean anything anymore?" She looked at him then, really looked at him, and he saw nothing behind her eyes, nothing familiar, nothing kind. "Love doesn't give me an heir, Marcus. Love doesn't save my company. Love doesn't erase the fact that I married down," she spat the word like venom, "and got absolutely nothing in return except empty rooms and pitying looks." "Is that what I am to you now?" Marcus whispered. "Not your husband, not a person, just a bad investment?" Victoria's smile was cold as winter. "Finally, you understand." He signed the papers with shaking hands, each signature feeling like he was erasing himself. When he finished, Victoria snatched them up without a word and disappeared into her office. Marcus packed one suitcase, taking only clothes and a single photo from their honeymoon, the one where they'd been laughing, where they'd believed in forever. As he walked out into the rain, he heard the nursery door slam and lock behind him. Victoria stood at the window watching him disappear into the night, a glass of scotch in her hand. She didn't cry. She didn't feel anything except a grim satisfaction that she'd finally cut out the dead weight. The next morning, she announced to the board that she was moving forward with a fresh perspective and renewed focus on the Ashford legacy. Nobody mentioned Marcus's name again. It was as if their 8 years together had been erased, a failed experiment best forgotten. But somewhere in Victoria's locked desk drawer, hidden beneath legal documents and quarterly reports, was a medical file she'd never opened after that first appointment. A file that contained the truth she couldn't face. Her own fertility was compromised, her egg reserve critically low, her chances of natural conception slim at best. The lie she'd built her divorce on was, in fact, a lie about herself. But acknowledging that would mean acknowledging everything else. The cruelty, the blame, the destruction of a good man who'd loved her unconditionally. And Victoria Ashford had never been good at facing inconvenient truths. So she buried it deeper and moved on, convinced she'd made the right choice, never suspecting that truth has a way of surfacing when you least expect it. Marcus Johnson hit rock bottom in a studio apartment above his failing architecture firm, surrounded by blueprints that no one wanted to see. The corporate clients had evaporated after word spread about his divorce. Victoria's circle closing ranks, protecting one of their own. He'd lost more than a wife. He'd lost his reputation, his confidence, the belief that he was worth anything at all. His childhood friend Tyrone found him at 3 in the morning, staring at their wedding photo with dead eyes. "Man, you can't keep doing this," Tyrone said, taking the frame gently from Marcus's hands. "You're disappearing right in front of me." "She said I was broken," Marcus whispered. 8 years she said it, and I started to believe it. Maybe she was right. Maybe I am. "Stop." Tyrone's voice was sharp. "Listen to me. You need to get tested. Not for her. For you. You need to know the truth." Marcus shook his head. "What difference does it make now? She's moved on." You're just what? Going to accept her version of you for the rest of your life? Bro, you taught me something when we were kids. Remember? When those cops stopped us for walking while black in a white neighborhood, you looked at me and said, "They don't get to define us, T. We define ourselves." Where's that Marcus now? The words penetrated slowly like light through dark water. Marcus looked at his friend, really looked at him. "I don't know if I can face it." "What if she was right?" "Then you'll know." "But what if she was wrong? What if you've been carrying her lie like it's your truth?" 3 days later, Marcus found himself in the waiting room of a community health clinic, filling out forms with trembling hands. He'd chosen this place deliberately, far from the gleaming medical towers of his former life, a place where his name meant nothing, where Victoria's shadow couldn't reach. Dr. Elena Martinez called him back. She was 38, with kind eyes and an accent that reminded him of his grandmother's neighbors in Chicago. When she reviewed his form and saw the reason for visit, fertility evaluation, her expression softened with understanding. "Mr. Johnson," she said gently, "before we begin, I want you to know something. Whatever these results show, they don't define your worth as a man or as a person. Do you understand me?" Marcus nodded, unable to speak. Her kindness was breaking something open inside him. "Can you tell me why you're here today? What brought you to this appointment?" The story poured out of him. 8 years of marriage, the monthly disappointments, Victoria's growing coldness, the accusations that grew sharper with time. He told her about the divorce papers, about being called broken, about believing he'd failed at the most basic human function. By the end, he was crying, and he didn't care who saw. Elena handed him tissues, her own eyes bright with angry tears. "That's unconscionable," she said quietly. "That's cruel beyond measure. And, Mr. Johnson, it's not how medicine works. Fertility issues are complex. They require testing both partners. The fact that she refused that basic step tells me more about her than it does about you." "But what if the test proves her right?" Marcus asked, his voice breaking. "What if I really am?" "Then we'll deal with that truth together," Elena said firmly. "But whatever the result, you are still whole. You are still valuable. You are still deserving of love and respect. A medical test doesn't change that. Nothing changes that." The blood draw took minutes. The waiting took 7 days that felt like 7 years. Marcus couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. He drafted housing designs and threw them away. He started letters to Victoria and burned them. He existed in a limbo between hope and despair, terrified of confirmation, but desperate for truth. When Elena called him back for results, her smile told him everything before she spoke a word. "Mr. Johnson," she said, sliding the report across her desk, "your sperm count is 180 million per milliliter. Normal range begins at 15 million. Your motility, the percentage of sperm that move effectively, is 75%. Normal is 40% or above. Your morphology, the shape and structure, is excellent, above the 95th percentile. Marcus stared at the numbers, his vision blurring. What does that mean? Elena leaned forward, her voice steady and sure. It means you are not infertile, Mr. Johnson. You have excellent above-average fertility markers. If you have biological children with someone, you would likely have no issues conceiving naturally. The world tilted. Marcus gripped the edge of the desk, his breath coming in short gasps. But she said, everyone said, I believed for 8 years that I was... You believed a lie, Elena said gently. Whether she lied intentionally or out of her own fear, I can't say. But it was a lie, nonetheless. And you've been carrying it like a cross. Marcus collapsed forward, his head in his hands, sobs tearing through him like a storm breaking. 8 years. 8 years of shame, of believing he was less than a man, of accepting blame for something that was never his fault. Elena came around the desk and sat beside him, her hand on his shoulder, letting him cry until the poison of those years began to drain away. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry someone made you believe that about yourself. When Marcus could finally speak, his voice was raw. How do I come back from this? How do I rebuild after believing I was broken for so long? Elena's answer was simple and profound. One truth at a time. Starting with this one, you were never broken. You were only told you were by someone who couldn't face her own truth. Over the following weeks, Elena offered continued counseling sessions, refusing payment. I've seen too many people destroyed by lies, she told him. Let me help you rebuild. Their conversations evolved from clinical to personal. She shared her own story. Her husband killed by a drunk driver 3 years ago, leaving her terrified to trust love again. Marcus shared his grandmother's wisdom. Dignity isn't given by others, son. It's claimed by yourself. 6 months later, sitting in a coffee shop, Elena said something that changed everything. I wasn't looking for love. I thought that part of my life was over. But here you are, Marcus Johnson, and I can't unsee you. Marcus felt his heart crack open, not breaking this time, but blooming. I'm scared, he admitted. Scared of believing again. Scared of being wrong about someone. Then let me prove I'm different, Elena said, taking his hand across the table. Let me show you what real love looks like. The kind that sees you, values you, chooses you every single day. 9 months later, Marcus stood in front of a small congregation, watching Elena walk toward him in a simple white dress. No Vera Wang, no orchestra, no society pages, just truth, witnessed by people who loved them. When the pastor said, "You may kiss your bride," Marcus whispered against Elena's lips, "You gave me back myself." 3 months after the wedding, Elena felt ill, dismissed it as stress from her hospital shifts. But when the nausea persisted, Marcus drove her to the clinic, holding her hand while she took the test in the bathroom. She emerged, pale as moonlight, the stick shaking in her hand. "Marcus," she breathed, "I'm pregnant." Joy exploded through him, but before he could speak, Elena's expression shifted to shock. "But there's something else. The line is very dark. We should get an ultrasound, just to be sure everything's..." The ultrasound, 3 days later, revealed 3 heartbeats. 3 small, fluttering miracles on the grainy screen. "Triplets," the technician said, smiling. "Congratulations. You're having triplets." Marcus stared at the screen, then at Elena, then back at the impossible truth before his eyes. 3 babies. Not 1. 3. The number felt biblical, like a divine answer to 8 years of accusation. Elena started laughing through tears. "You don't do anything halfway, do you?" Marcus dropped to his knees beside the examination table, pressing his face against Elena's stomach. Thank you, he whispered. To God, to Elena, to the universe that had proven Victoria's cruelty wrong in the most undeniable way possible. Thank you for showing me the truth. The pregnancy was challenging, triplets always are, but Marcus was there for every appointment, every midnight craving, every moment of fear. And on a cool October morning, in a delivery room filled with controlled chaos, 3 sons entered the world. Caleb Marcus Johnson arrived at 6:17 a.m., 5 pounds 2 ounces, crying lustily with his father's deep brown eyes. Isaiah Emmanuel followed at 6:19 a.m., 4 pounds 15 ounces, quiet and watchful. Elijah David completed the trio at 6:23 a.m., 5 pounds 1 ounce, his tiny hand already reaching for his brother's. When the nurse placed Caleb in Marcus's arms, he wept without shame. "Hi, son," he whispered, his voice thick with wonder. "I'm your daddy, and I promise you something. You will never, ever doubt that you are loved. You will never question your worth. You will never carry someone else's lies about who you are." Elena, exhausted and radiant, watched her husband hold their sons. "They have your eyes," she said softly. "Your smile. Your beautiful soul." "They have your courage," Marcus replied, looking at all 3 babies, his heart so full it ached. "Your fierce heart." He thought of Victoria then, briefly, of the woman who'd told him he was broken, who'd thrown him away like defective merchandise, and he felt only pity, because she'd been wrong, catastrophically, completely wrong, and these 3 perfect boys were living proof. The nurse took a photo, Marcus cradling all 3 sons, Elena beside them, all of them glowing with joy. That photo would eventually find its way to social media, shared by Elena's proud family. It would spread through networks, crossing invisible boundaries until it reached Atlanta's elite circles, until it reached a woman in a penthouse planning another wedding, trying to convince herself she'd made the right choice all those years ago. But Marcus didn't know that yet. In this moment, holding his sons, he knew only one truth that mattered. He had never been broken. He had only been lied to by someone too afraid to face her own reflection. And now, finally, he was free. 3 years after the triplets were born, Marcus Johnson's life had transformed in ways he'd once thought impossible. The broken man who'd left Victoria's penthouse with a single suitcase had become someone he barely recognized, not because he'd changed fundamentally, but because he'd finally become himself. The transformation began with Elena's father, Roberto Martinez, a cardiologist who'd built his practice from nothing after immigrating from Mexico. Over Sunday dinners, Roberto watched Marcus play with the boys, saw how he'd sketch buildings on napkins while explaining to 3-year-old Caleb why houses needed strong foundations. One evening, Roberto pulled Marcus aside. "Mijo," he said, using the affectionate term for son, "I see your heart. I see your vision. Let me invest in your dreams." He offered $500,000 to launch Dignity Designs, a firm dedicated to affordable housing that didn't look or feel cheap. Marcus had wept, trying to refuse. He couldn't take such a gift. But Roberto was firm. "It's not a gift. It's an investment in a man who builds with integrity. That's rarer than you think." The first project was modest, renovating 20 units in South Side Chicago, the neighborhood where Marcus had grown up. He designed homes that were energy efficient but beautiful, with natural light and community spaces, rent-controlled but dignified. When the local news covered the project, the headline read, "Architect Puts People Over Profits." The story went viral. Corporate interest followed. Atlanta's mayor's office reached out about redesigning public housing in the struggling West Side neighborhood. The contract was worth $8 million, more money than Marcus had ever imagined. But he was meticulous, insisting on hiring a diverse team, mentoring young black architects who'd faced the same barriers he had. Yet success didn't change his daily rhythm. Every morning, Marcus woke before dawn to feed the triplets. Caleb, the serious one, always asked impossible questions over cereal. "Daddy, why do some kids live in broken houses?" Marcus would kneel to his eye level. "Because not everyone has been treated fairly, son. But Daddy's job is to change that, one building at a time." Isaiah, quiet and observant, would watch his father's face. "Are we rich, Daddy?" Marcus would smile. "We have love, health, and purpose. That's the richest anyone can be." Elijah, the artist, would show his crayon drawings. "Look, Daddy, our family, everyone's smiling." And Elena, listening from the kitchen, would call out, "That's because we are all smiling, baby." After breakfast, Marcus would drop the boys at daycare, work until pickup time, then come home to cook dinner while they played at his feet. He worked late only after they slept, designing by lamplight while Elena studied medical journals. It was exhausting. It was beautiful. It was everything he'd been told he could never have. When the West Side project completed, 200 families housed in dignity, the American Institute of Architects awarded Dignity Designs the Social Impact Design of the Year. Marcus accepted the award in a modest suit, his speech simple. "Architecture isn't about ego or monuments. It's about honoring the humanity of the people who live in the spaces we create. Every person deserves beauty. Every family deserves dignity. That's not charity, that's justice." The firm's valuation climbed to $50 million. Investors circled, offering buyouts. Marcus refused them all. Instead, he funneled 90% of profits into a scholarship fund for minority architects. His own family lived in a modest ranch house, drove practical cars, attended a small church where nobody cared about his net worth. "Why don't we move to a bigger house?" Elena asked once. Not complaining, just curious. Marcus looked at their home. Toys scattered across the living room, the boys' artwork covering the refrigerator, family photos on every surface. "Because this is enough. More than enough. I don't need the world to see our success. I need our sons to see our values." Meanwhile, across Atlanta, Victoria Ashford's life followed a different trajectory, one that glittered on the surface but crumbled underneath. After the divorce, she'd thrown herself into finding a replacement, someone who checked every box Marcus hadn't. Richard Crawford was perfect on paper. 50 years old, corporate lawyer, generational wealth, impeccable bloodline. Eleanor approved immediately. Their courtship lasted 4 months, just long enough to plan a spectacular wedding, but not long enough to build real intimacy. Victoria told herself this was practical, mature, the smart choice after the mistake of marrying for love. But at night, alone in her penthouse, she'd find herself crying for reasons she couldn't name. The pregnancy issue haunted her like a ghost. She'd gone for testing secretly after the divorce, choosing a clinic 2 hours away where no one would recognize her. The diagnosis was devastating. Premature ovarian failure, likely genetic, her egg reserve critically depleted. Natural conception was possible but unlikely. IVF was her best option, and even that carried low success rates. She'd sat in her car afterward, the medical report burning in her hands, and realized the full weight of what she'd done to Marcus. It had been her all along, her body that couldn't conceive easily, her genetics that had betrayed her. And she'd blamed him, destroyed him, thrown him away to protect herself from a truth she couldn't face. The report went into a locked drawer in her desk, buried under other papers. She never showed Richard, never told her mother. The lie she'd built her divorce on remained intact because the truth was too devastating to acknowledge. She tried IVF in secret, embezzling from the company's discretionary fund to cover the costs, $30,000 per cycle. 3 cycles failed. Each failure carved her hollow. Richard found the bank statements, confronted her. "Where is this money going?" She'd exploded, deflecting. "My money, my business." But his eyes had narrowed with suspicion. By year 3 of their engagement, Richard had grown cold and distant. The board pressure intensified. Her cousin Bradley was campaigning for CEO position, pointing out that Victoria had been in leadership for 5 years with no heir apparent. "Perhaps fresh leadership is needed," he'd suggest in meetings, his smile predatory. Eleanor's solution was simple. "Have the wedding, a lavish one. Show Atlanta society that you're thriving. Project strength. The baby will come eventually, or you'll find another solution. But you need to secure Richard first." Planning the $2 million wedding became Victoria's obsession, a way to prove to the world and to herself that she'd made the right choices. Every detail had to be perfect. Every guest list revision was strategic. And in a moment of bitter impulse, she added one more name, Marcus Johnson. "Why would you invite your ex-husband?" her wedding planner had asked, confused. Victoria's smile was sharp. "Because I want him to see what he lost. I want him to watch me marry a real man, live my real life. He needs to understand that I won, that I moved on to something better." But Eleanor, ever perceptive, saw deeper. "Or perhaps, darling, you need to see if he's really happy. You need to confirm that you made the right choice." Victoria didn't answer, but late that night she found herself searching for Marcus online. His firm's website showed the West Side Project. News articles praised his vision, but no personal information. No photos, no indication of whether he'd remarried, moved on, found happiness. She told herself she was being thorough, strategic, but her hands shook when she typed his name. And when she finally sent the invitation, printed on gold cardstock, his name in elegant script, she felt something twist in her chest. She wanted him there to prove her victory. But she also, in a way she couldn't admit even to herself, wanted to see him again. To know if he still carried the broken expression he'd worn when he signed those papers. To confirm that she'd been right to throw him away. The RSVP came back 3 weeks before the wedding. Marcus Johnson, +4. Attending. Victoria stared at the +4 for a long time. Who was he bringing? A new wife. Children that couldn't possibly be his. The thought made her laugh bitterly. Of course they couldn't be his. She'd been right about that at least. Hadn't she? But doubt, once planted, grows like weeds. Late at night she'd remember moments. Marcus suggesting they both get tested, his confusion when she refused, his wounded expression when she'd called him broken. What if she'd been wrong? What if the problem had been hers all along, and she'd destroyed an innocent man to avoid facing it? She'd pour another glass of wine and push the thoughts away. Too late for regrets, too late for truth. The wedding was in 3 weeks. Richard Crawford would become her husband. Her life would be secure. The past would stay buried where it belonged. But in a modest ranch house across town, Marcus tucked his 3 sons into bed, kissed Elena goodnight, and thought briefly about the invitation sitting on his desk. He'd discussed it with Elena, whether to go, whether to bring the boys, whether it was wise to walk back into that world. "I need to close that chapter," he'd told her. "Not with anger, not with revenge, just with truth. I want her to see that she didn't break me. That I'm whole." Elena had studied his face and nodded slowly. "Then we go together, all of us. Because hiding our happiness isn't protection, it's shame. And we have nothing to be ashamed of." Marcus had smiled, grateful beyond words for a woman who understood that showing up wasn't about victory. It was about freedom, about standing in truth so complete that lies couldn't touch it. So the RSVP went out. Marcus Johnson, +4, attending. And 3 weeks later, A black Rolls-Royce would pull up to the Grand Marquis ballroom, and truth would finally come calling. The morning of Victoria's wedding arrived with crystalline Atlanta sunshine, the kind that makes everything look deceptively perfect. At the Grand Marquis Ballroom, 400 chairs sat in pristine rows, white roses cascading from every surface, a string orchestra tuning instruments that cost more than most people's cars. This was the wedding Victoria had dreamed of, or rather, the wedding she'd convinced herself she wanted. In the presidential suite, Victoria stood before a floor-length mirror while 3 assistants fussed over her $15,000 Vera Wang gown. 200 hand-sewn crystals caught the light, making her shimmer like something precious and untouchable. Her blonde hair was swept into an elaborate updo that had taken 2 hours to perfect. Everything was flawless. Everything was controlled. Yet her hands wouldn't stop trembling. "Victoria, you look absolutely stunning," her bridesmaid Jessica gushed, adjusting the cathedral veil. "Richard is going to lose his mind when he sees you." Victoria forced a smile, studying her reflection. She looked like a bride from a magazine spread, beautiful, wealthy, powerful, but her eyes told a different story. They looked hollow, haunted by something she couldn't name or wouldn't acknowledge. Her phone buzzed with the RSVP confirmation list. Her assistant had sent the final update. All guests accounted for, including Marcus Johnson, party of 5. Victoria's stomach lurched. 5. He was bringing 4 people. The number felt impossibly large, impossibly real. "Who's he bringing?" she'd asked her assistant yesterday, trying to sound casual. "The system just shows +4, ma'am, no names." Now, standing in her bridal suite, Victoria couldn't stop imagining possibilities. A new wife, certainly. Maybe her parents, perhaps a sibling. Normal, explainable additions, not children. Children would mean, but no, that was impossible. She'd been right about him. She had to have been right. Eleanor swept in, immaculate in champagne silk, her expression critical as always. "Well, you look acceptable," she said, which was her version of a compliment. "The society photographers are positioned perfectly. The Crawfords have arrived, very impressed with the arrangements. Everything is proceeding exactly as planned." "Mother," Victoria said suddenly, her voice cracking slightly, did I make the right choice? With Marcus, I mean, all those years ago." Eleanor's expression hardened. "Victoria Ashford, you will not have a crisis of conscience on your wedding day. You made the practical choice, the intelligent choice. That man couldn't give you what you needed." "But what if nothing?" Eleanor snapped. "I've seen him online. His little architecture firm, his bleeding heart projects for poor people. He's exactly what he always was, a man with more heart than sense, more dreams than ability to execute them. You've moved on to Richard Crawford, real power, real breeding, real prospects. Don't you dare dishonor this family by doubting that now." Victoria nodded mechanically, but her mother's words rang false. She'd seen those same articles, Marcus's firm valued at $50 million, his awards, his impact. That wasn't failure. That was the opposite of failure. Across Atlanta, in a modest ranch house, a very different morning was unfolding. Marcus stood in front of his bathroom mirror, adjusting his navy tie for the 3rd time. His hands were steady, but his heart was pounding. Elena appeared behind him, beautiful in a red dress that complemented her olive skin. "You don't have to do this," she said softly, placing her hands on his shoulders. "We can turn around right now. Go to the park with the boys. Forget all of this." Marcus met her eyes in the mirror. "I need to close this chapter. Not for revenge. Not to prove anything. Just to stand in my truth so completely that her lies can't touch it anymore." From the living room came the sound of the triplets arguing about bow ties. "Mine's too tight," Caleb complained. "Daddy, Isaiah keeps messing up his hair," Elijah announced. Marcus smiled despite his nerves. He turned to Elena, taking her hands. "What if this is a mistake? What if bringing the boys just makes things worse? Elena's expression was fierce. Those boys are your truth, Marcus. They're living proof of everything she said was a lie. Hiding them would be accepting her shame, and we have nothing to be ashamed of. Marcus pulled her close, breathing in her familiar scent, lavender and strength. How did I get so lucky to find you? Not luck, she whispered against his chest. Grace, you were always worthy of love. You just needed someone who could see it. In the living room, Marcus knelt before his 3 sons, all dressed in matching navy suits with crisp white shirts. At 3 years old, they were still small enough to believe their father could fix anything, brave enough to face the unknown with curiosity instead of fear. Boys, he said gently, we're going somewhere special today. We're going to see someone who was important to Daddy a long time ago. The sad lady? Caleb asked. Marcus had told them in simple terms about his first wife, a woman who'd been hurt and had hurt him in return but whom he'd forgiven. Yes, the sad lady. She's getting married today, and we're going to her wedding. Isaiah, always the thoughtful one, cocked his head. Why would we go if she was mean to you? Marcus chose his words carefully. Because sometimes, son, the best way to heal from someone's meanness is to show them you're okay, not to hurt them back, but to prove that their words didn't break you. Can you understand that? The boys nodded, not fully comprehending but trusting their father completely. Elijah tugged on Marcus's sleeve. Daddy, will there be cake? Marcus laughed, the sound releasing some of his tension. Probably, buddy. Probably. Elena's father, Roberto, arrived with the Rolls-Royce Phantom he'd rented for the occasion. Mijo, he said, embracing Marcus. You walk in there with your head high. You are a king. Your sons are princes. Don't you forget it. I'm nervous, Marcus admitted. What if seeing her brings everything back? The pain, the shame, the... Roberto gripped his shoulders. Then you look at your wife. You look at your sons. And you remember, that pain belongs to the past. Your joy is now. The drive to the Grand Marquis took 30 minutes through Atlanta traffic. In the back seat, the triplets pressed their faces to the windows, marveling at the tall buildings. Elena held Marcus's hand, her grip steady and sure. Neither of them spoke much. The magnitude of what they were about to do settled over them like a weight, not crushing, but significant. As they pulled up to the venue, Marcus saw the red carpet, the photographers, the elegant guests arriving in expensive cars. This was Victoria's world, the world he'd briefly inhabited, the world that had ultimately rejected him. His stomach tightened. Daddy, Caleb said suddenly, you said the sad lady made you feel small. Yes, son, but you're not small. You're the biggest person I know. Marcus turned to his eldest, tears suddenly burning his eyes. Thank you, buddy. I needed to hear that. The valet approached, eyes widening at the Rolls-Royce. When the door opened and Marcus stepped out, tall, confident in his tailored suit, several early arriving guests turned to look. Then Elena emerged, stunning in red, a vision of grace and strength. And finally the triplets tumbled out, their matching outfits and bright faces drawing audible gasps. Who is that? Someone whispered. I don't recognize them from the society pages. Those children are beautiful. Look at them! Marcus took Elena's hand, and together they walked toward the entrance, the boys between them. Caleb on his left, Isaiah and Elijah holding Elena's hands on the right. They moved as a unit, a family so clearly bonded that their love was almost visible. At the entrance, the usher checked his list. Name, please? Marcus Johnson, he said clearly, his voice steady. Party of 5. The usher's eyes widened almost imperceptibly. He'd been briefed. This was the ex-husband, the one the bride had invited for reasons no one quite understood, but no one had mentioned children. "Of course, Mr. Johnson. Right this way." As they entered the ballroom, heads began to turn like dominoes falling. The massive space was a vision of white and gold, roses everywhere, crystal chandeliers catching sunlight through floor-to-ceiling windows. The orchestra was playing something classical and dignified. 400 of Atlanta's elite were assembled, dressed in their finest, waiting to witness Victoria Ashford marry Richard Crawford. But now, all eyes shifted to the family walking down the center aisle. Marcus moved with quiet dignity, his bearing that of a man who'd fought his way through darkness and emerged into light. Elena walked beside him, her head high, her expression serene. And the triplets, beautiful, curious, unmistakably his, looked around with wide-eyed wonder. "Is that—" someone started. "It can't be," another whispered. "Those children," a woman gasped. "They look just like—" Eleanor Ashford, seated in the front row in her place of honor, stood abruptly, her champagne silk dress rustling with indignation. Her face had gone pale, then red, cycling through emotions too quickly to track. "What is he doing here with children?" Richard Crawford, standing near the altar in his tuxedo, frowned. "Who is that man?" he asked his groomsman. "I believe," the groomsman said slowly, "that's Victoria's ex-husband." Richard's frown deepened as he watched Marcus's family approach. The children's resemblance to Marcus was unmistakable, the same deep brown skin, the same bone structure, the same gentle eyes. "Her ex-husband has children?" "Apparently so." The usher led them to their assigned seats, front row, left side, directly across from Eleanor. The seating choice had been Victoria's, a power move designed to force Marcus to watch her triumph up close. But now it felt like something else entirely. As Marcus settled into his seat with Elena beside him and the boys between them, Caleb's voice rang out in the suddenly quiet ballroom, loud and innocent and devastating. "Daddy, is this where you used to live?" The silence that followed was absolute. Even the orchestra had stopped playing. 400 guests turned to stare, the whispers building like a wave. "Did that child just call him Daddy? Oh my God, he has children. But Victoria said she told everyone he was—" "How many children is that? 3? This is impossible. This has to be—" In her bridal suite, Victoria heard none of this directly, but her assistant burst through the door, phone in hand, face ashen. "Victoria, there's a situation." Victoria turned from the mirror, her veil catching the light. "What kind of situation?" "It's Marcus. He's here, in the ballroom." "I know he's here. I invited him." "But Victoria," the assistant's voice cracked, "he brought children. 3 little boys. And they're calling him Daddy." The room tilted. Victoria gripped the edge of her vanity, the crystals on her gown suddenly feeling like they were cutting into her skin. "That's not possible. They're in the front row right now. The whole ballroom is talking. People are saying—" The assistant hesitated. "Saying what?" Victoria's voice was barely a whisper. "They're saying the children look exactly like him, that if he has sons, biological sons, then maybe—" The assistant trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Victoria's legs gave out. She sank onto the plush ottoman, her expensive gown pooling around her like a white sea. 3 children. Marcus had 3 children, which meant he wasn't infertile, which meant she'd been wrong, which meant everything. The divorce, the accusations, the destruction of a good man had been built on a lie. Her lie. Jessica rushed to her side. "Vic, breathe. Just breathe. Maybe they're adopted. Maybe they're his wife's from another marriage. Maybe—" But Victoria knew. Deep in her bones, beneath all the lies she'd told herself, she knew. Those boys were his, biologically his, and she had destroyed their marriage because she'd been too afraid, too proud, too broken to face the truth about herself. In the ballroom, Eleanor had crossed the aisle, her face a mask of fury barely contained by social propriety. She stood before Marcus, looking down at him and his family with unconcealed disdain. "You have some nerve," she hissed, quiet enough that only nearby guests could hear, "coming here with this spectacle." Marcus looked up at her calmly. "Mrs. Ashford, I was invited, and I came with my family, my wife, Elena, and my sons, Caleb, Isaiah, and Elijah." At the mention of sons, Eleanor's composure cracked further. "Those can't be, you can't possibly—" "Can't possibly what?" Marcus asked, his voice still gentle but now edged with something harder. "Can't possibly be a father? Can't possibly have children? Isn't that what you and Victoria told everyone? That I was broken? That I was the problem?" Elena stood, placing herself slightly in front of Marcus, her doctor's training making her protective. "Mrs. Ashford, I think you should return to your seat. This isn't the time or place." "You have no right to tell me," Eleanor started, but her voice was rising now, and more guests were openly staring. Caleb tugged on his father's sleeve, confused and a little frightened by the angry woman. "Daddy, why is she mad?" Marcus lifted his son onto his lap, a gesture so natural and loving that several guests gasped. "Because sometimes, buddy, when people realize they were wrong about something important, they get angry instead of apologizing." The words carried in the acoustically perfect ballroom. Eleanor's face went crimson. She opened her mouth to respond, but Richard Crawford was suddenly there, having walked down from the altar. "What exactly is going on here?" Richard demanded, looking between Marcus and Eleanor. Then his eyes fell on the triplets, and his expression shifted to confused realization. "Someone needs to explain to me right now why Victoria's ex-husband is sitting in my wedding with 3 children who are clearly his." Marcus stood slowly, settling Caleb back into his seat beside his brothers. He faced Richard with quiet dignity. "I'm here because I was invited, Mr. Crawford. As for my sons, they exist because I am not, and never was, infertile. Despite what I was told for 8 years, despite what I believed about myself, despite what your bride told you and everyone else." Richard's face went pale. "She said you couldn't have children. She said that's why she divorced you." "I know what she said," Marcus replied softly. "She was wrong, or she was lying. I'm still not entirely sure which." In that moment, the door to the bridal suite burst open and Victoria appeared at the top of the staircase that led down to the ballroom. Her veil was askew, her makeup smudged from tears, her perfect facade finally, irreparably cracked. She stood there, frozen, staring down at the scene below, Marcus standing tall and confident, his beautiful wife beside him. 3 small boys who looked exactly like him, living proof of everything Victoria had denied, and 400 guests, all of Atlanta's elite, watching her world collapse in real time. "No," she whispered, but in the silent ballroom even a whisper carried. "No, this can't be." But it was. Truth had finally arrived at Victoria Ashford's wedding, uninvited but undeniable. And there was nowhere left to hide. Victoria descended the stairs like a woman walking to her own execution, each step in her crystal-encrusted heels echoing through the silent ballroom. 400 guests watched her approach, their expressions ranging from shock to pity to barely concealed schadenfreude. This was the moment Atlanta society had been waiting for, not a wedding, but a reckoning. Her eyes were locked on Marcus and his family. The 3 little boys sitting so peacefully in the front row, their matching navy suits and innocent faces. Elena, standing protectively beside her husband, radiating a quiet strength Victoria had never possessed. And Marcus himself, the man she'd thrown away, the man she'd called broken, standing there, whole and dignified in a way that made her chest physically ache. Richard met her at the bottom of the stairs, his expression thunderous. "Victoria," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "We need to talk. Now. Privately." But Victoria couldn't move. She was frozen, staring at those three children. Caleb, the oldest, looked back at her with Marcus's gentle eyes. Isaiah watched her warily, sensing tension he was too young to understand. Elijah held a small toy car, oblivious to the drama unfolding around him. "Victoria!" Richard's voice was sharper now, cutting through her paralysis. "Did you hear me?" She turned to him slowly, and he recoiled slightly at what he saw in her face. Not defiance, not anger, but complete devastation. "You told me," Richard said, his words clipped and precise, "that your ex-husband was infertile. You told me that's why you divorced him. You told me the problem was his, that you'd been tested and cleared, that I would be different, that we would have children." Victoria's mouth opened, but no sound came out. What could she say? The truth was standing 15 feet away, in the form of three beautiful boys who proved every word she'd spoken had been a lie. "I asked you 3 times to show me medical records," Richard continued, his voice rising despite his attempts at control. 3 times I suggested we both get tested before marriage, and every time you deflected. You said it wasn't necessary. You said you knew the problem wasn't you. You said—" He stopped, his jaw clenching. "You said a lot of things that appear to have been lies." Eleanor rushed forward, always the protector of family reputation. "Richard, please, let's discuss this privately. There's no need to air—" "Air what, Mrs. Ashford? The truth?" Richard's laugh was bitter. "The truth that your daughter destroyed a man's reputation, blamed him for something that apparently wasn't his fault, and then had the audacity to invite him here to humiliate him further? Except the humiliation appears to be going in an entirely different direction." From his seat, Marcus spoke quietly, but his voice carried in the acoustically perfect space. "Mr. Crawford, if I may—" "No," Richard cut him off, but not unkindly. "Mr. Johnson, you don't owe me anything. In fact, I believe I owe you an apology. I accepted Victoria's version of events without question. I should have asked more questions. I should have—" He stopped, turning back to Victoria. "How long have you known?" Victoria's voice, when it finally came, was barely a whisper. "Known what?" "That you lied. That he wasn't the problem. How long have you known the truth?" The ballroom was so silent that people in the back rows leaned forward, straining to hear. Victoria looked at Marcus, at his sons, at the life he'd built without her. Then she looked at Richard, at the wedding that would never happen, at the future crumbling around her. "Since the divorce," she whispered. "I got tested after he left. The doctor said I have premature ovarian failure, that my egg reserve is critically low, that natural conception was unlikely, that it was probably me all along." The gasps rippled through the crowd like a wave. Eleanor's face went white, then red, her mouth opening and closing soundlessly. Jessica, Victoria's bridesmaid, stepped back unconsciously, as if the revelation was contagious. Richard's expression shifted through several emotions: shock, fury, disgust, before settling on something worse. Pity. "You knew," he said slowly. "You knew it was you, and you still blamed him. You still destroyed him. You still let everyone believe—" "I was afraid!" Victoria's voice broke, loud now, years of pain finally erupting. "I was terrified. Do you know what happens to Ashford women who can't produce heirs? My grandmother was cast out, died alone in a county hospital. Her name was erased from every family record. I grew up hearing that story like a cautionary tale. 'Don't be like her,' my father would say. 'Don't fail the bloodline.' She turned to Marcus, tears streaming down her face, ruining her perfect makeup. "You were kind. You were patient. You loved me. And I repaid you by making you the villain in my story because I couldn't face being the broken one. I couldn't face being her, my grandmother, the family shame, so I made you carry my shame instead." Marcus stood slowly, and Elena touched his arm, a question. He nodded slightly, and she let him go, though her protective instincts were clearly on high alert. He walked toward Victoria, and she flinched, expecting anger, expecting the fury she deserved. But when Marcus spoke, his voice was gentle. "Victoria, did you ever consider that we could have faced the truth together? That we could have explored options, adoption, IVF, even choosing not to have children? Did it ever occur to you that I would have chosen you over an heir?" "But you shouldn't have had to choose," Victoria sobbed. "You deserved children." "You deserved—" She gestured toward his family, unable to finish. "I deserved honesty," Marcus said quietly. "I deserved to be treated as a partner, not a scapegoat. And yes, I deserved children. But Victoria, so did you. You could have had that. We could have fought for it together. Instead, you chose to fight alone, and you destroyed us both in the process." Richard stepped forward, his decision made. "The wedding is off," he announced to the room. "I will not marry someone who has shown such capacity for cruelty, such willingness to destroy another person to protect herself." He looked at Victoria, and there was genuine sadness in his eyes. "I hope you find help, Victoria. I hope you find healing. But I can't be part of this." He removed his boutonniere, placed it on a nearby chair, and walked out of the ballroom. The groomsmen followed, unsure what else to do. Guests began to murmur. Phones appeared, the social media documentation beginning. This would be the scandal of the decade. Eleanor rushed to Victoria's side, her face a mask of fury mixed with panic. "You foolish girl," she hissed. "Do you have any idea what you've done? The board will have you removed within a week. Bradley will take everything. The Ashford legacy—" "The Ashford legacy," Victoria said with sudden clarity, her voice stronger now, "can burn for all I care. It's killed everything I ever loved. It turned me into someone I don't recognize. It made me destroy the one person who actually loved me for myself, not for what I could produce." She turned to Marcus again, this desperation in her eyes. "I am so sorry. I know those words are inadequate. I know they can't undo 8 years of pain. But Marcus, I am truly, devastatingly sorry. You were a good man. You were a good husband. And I was too broken, too afraid, too selfish to see it." Before Marcus could respond, Caleb slipped away from Elena and walked up to Victoria. The 3-year-old looked up at her, his head tilted in that way children have when they're trying to understand adult emotions. "Are you the sad lady?" he asked, his voice carrying through the silent ballroom. Victoria knelt down slowly, her expensive gown pooling on the floor. "Yes, sweetheart, I'm the sad lady." Caleb studied her face seriously. "Daddy says everyone gets sad sometimes. He says it's okay to be sad. But you shouldn't hurt people when you're sad. That makes more sadness." The simple wisdom from a child's mouth broke something in Victoria. She covered her face with her hands and sobbed, not the controlled tears of before, but deep, wrenching cries that came from a place of profound grief. Grief for her marriage, for the children she'd never have, for the person she'd become, for the good man she'd destroyed. Elena came forward and gently guided Caleb back to his brothers. Then, surprisingly, she knelt beside Victoria. Mrs. Crawford, it's still Ashford, Victoria said bitterly. I guess it always will be now. Elena nodded. Mrs. Ashford, then. I'm a doctor. I've seen a lot of pain in my career. And I can tell you that what you're experiencing now, this is rock bottom. This is where healing has to begin, not with lies, not with blame, not with pride, with truth. Painful, humiliating, devastating truth. Victoria looked at her, this woman who had everything Victoria had thrown away. How can you even speak to me? I destroyed your husband. I made him believe he was broken. You did, Elena agreed, her tone matter-of-fact but not cruel. And that was unconscionable. But Marcus healed. He found out the truth. He rebuilt himself. And part of that healing was learning that hurt people hurt people. You were hurt, deeply hurt by your family's expectations and your own fears. That doesn't excuse what you did, but it explains it. Eleanor, listening to this exchange, finally found her voice. Victoria, get up. We need to leave. We need to manage this situation. Control the narrative. No, Victoria said firmly, standing slowly. No more controlling narratives. No more lies. Mother, I'm done. Done? Done with what? With all of it. The company, the legacy, the performance. I'm done pretending that the Ashford name is worth more than basic human decency. I'm done sacrificing real love for social standing. I'm done being you. Eleanor's face went pale. You ungrateful, after everything I've done, everything I've sacrificed for you. You didn't sacrifice for me, Mother. You sacrificed me. For a legacy, for a name, for appearance. And I let you. I became you. And look where it got me. Victoria gestured to the ballroom, to the gawking guests, to the shambles of her life. Alone? Exposed? Broken? Just like you've always been? You just hid it better. Eleanor's hand rose as if to slap her, but Marcus stepped forward. Mrs. Ashford, I think you should leave. This isn't your moment. It's your daughter's. Let her have it. For a moment, Eleanor looked as if she might argue, but something in Marcus's calm authority made her lower her hand. She gathered her designer handbag, lifted her chin with the last remnants of her pride, and walked out of the ballroom. Several guests followed her, unable to resist the pull of continued drama. But many stayed. They stayed to watch Victoria, this woman who'd had everything, finally face the consequences of her choices. There was something almost biblical about it. The powerful brought low, truth revealed, judgment passed. Victoria turned back to Marcus, her mascara running in black rivulets down her face. What now? She asked. What happens now? Marcus looked at his family, Elena gathering the boys, preparing to leave this toxic situation. Isaiah was getting fussy, tired of sitting still. Elijah was asking about cake. Caleb was watching the adults with those serious eyes that saw too much. Now, Marcus said gently, you face yourself. You get help, real help, therapy, support. You learn to separate your worth from your ability to produce heirs. You learn that you are more than your last name, more than your family's expectations, more than your womb. How? Victoria's voice was small, childlike. How do I even begin? The same way I did, Marcus replied, by accepting the truth, by forgiving yourself, by choosing to be better, even when it's hard, even when it hurts, even when everyone is watching you fail. He paused, then added, Victoria, you were wrong about me, but you were also wrong about yourself. You are not your grandmother. You are not a failure because you can't have children easily. You are a failure because you chose cruelty over vulnerability. But that you can change if you want to. Victoria nodded slowly, the fight draining out of her. I want to. I want to be better. I don't know if I can, but I want to try. Then try, Elena said, standing beside her husband. Start there, with trying. Marcus took Elena's hand, then called to his sons. Boys, time to go. Say goodbye. The triplets, well-mannered despite the chaos, waved. Bye, sad lady, Elijah called out. I hope you feel better. As Marcus's family walked toward the exit, Victoria called out one last time. Marcus, he turned, patient even now. Thank you, she said, for showing me what forgiveness looks like, for being the man I couldn't appreciate when I had the chance. For everything. Marcus nodded once, a gesture of acknowledgement, if not quite forgiveness. And then they were gone. The Rolls-Royce pulled away from the Grand Marquis, carrying a family toward home, toward peace, toward a future uncomplicated by lies. Behind them, Victoria stood alone in her wedding dress, surrounded by the wreckage of her perfect day. The orchestra had packed up. The guests were leaving in clusters, already composing social media posts. The roses were wilting in the heat, but for the first time in years, Victoria felt something other than fear or anger or desperate pride. She felt the terrible, liberating weight of truth, and maybe, just maybe, that was where healing could finally begin. 1 year passed like a season changing, slowly at first, then all at once. The scandal that had erupted at Victoria Ashford's aborted wedding became Atlanta legend, the kind of story people would whisper about for decades. Social media had been merciless. The photographs of Marcus with his triplets, of Victoria's tear-streaked face, of Richard Crawford walking out, they'd gone viral within hours. News outlets picked up the story. CEO's wedding implodes after ex-husband arrives with proof of her lies. For Victoria, the aftermath was devastating and, paradoxically, liberating. Within a week, the Ashford Pharmaceuticals Board had called an emergency meeting. Her cousin Bradley, who'd been circling for years, moved swiftly. Clearly, Victoria's judgment has been compromised, he'd argued. The company's reputation is at stake. We need stable leadership. Victoria didn't fight. She resigned from the CEO position with a simple statement. I have caused harm through my actions and my dishonesty. I am stepping down to focus on becoming a better person. The Ashford legacy deserves leadership with integrity, something I failed to provide. Eleanor was apoplectic, calling her daughter daily with increasingly desperate pleas to fight back and reclaim what's yours. But Victoria had changed her number, moved out of the penthouse, and enrolled in intensive therapy. She'd chosen a modest apartment in a neighborhood far from her former social circles, where nobody recognized her or cared about pharmaceutical dynasties. Her therapist, Dr. Miriam Chen, didn't coddle her. In their first session, Dr. Chen had looked at Victoria over her reading glasses and said, "You understand that what you did to Marcus Johnson was emotional abuse, correct? You systematically destroyed his self-worth to avoid confronting your own fears." That's textbook abusive behavior. Victoria had flinched at the word abusive. I never hit him. Abuse isn't always physical, Dr. Chen interrupted. You weaponized his insecurities, blamed him for your failures, and cast him out when he became inconvenient to your narrative. The fact that you didn't use your fists doesn't make it less damaging. The sessions were brutal. Victoria cried through most of them. She confronted the truth about her family's toxic legacy, how her grandmother's story had been used as a weapon of control, how her father had valued legacy over love, how her mother had perpetuated generational trauma disguised as family pride. She examined her own complicity, her cowardice, her willingness to destroy an innocent person rather than face uncomfortable truths about herself. I don't know who I am without the Ashford name, she admitted 6 months into therapy. Then this is your chance to find out, Dr. Chen replied. Victoria started small. She got a job, her first real job that wasn't handed to her, as a consultant for a nonprofit focused on affordable health care access. The pay was a fraction of her former salary. Her coworkers didn't know her history. She was just Victoria, the quiet woman with sadness in her eyes who worked hard and kept to herself. She volunteered at a women's shelter, listening to stories of women escaping abusive relationships. Their stories mirrored her own, not as the victim, but as the perpetrator. She recognized her tactics in the controlling partners these women described. The realization made her physically ill. 8 months after the wedding disaster, Victoria wrote a letter. She revised it 47 times before she was satisfied. It was addressed to Marcus, sent to his architecture firm with a note requesting he read it only if he wanted to. The letter was simple. Marcus, I am writing not to ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But to tell you that I am trying to become someone worthy of the kindness you showed me even when I least deserved it. I have started therapy. I have left the company. I am learning that my worth is not tied to my ability to produce heirs or maintain a family legacy. You tried to teach me that when we were married, and I was too broken to hear it. I hear it now. Thank you for your patience, even in retrospect. I hope your family continues to thrive. You deserve every happiness. With genuine remorse and respect, Victoria. She didn't expect a response. She didn't get one. But writing it, sending it, releasing it into the world, that was part of her healing. Meanwhile, in a ranch house across Atlanta, Marcus's life had continued in its joyful rhythm. The wedding confrontation had been difficult. The boys had sensed tension they couldn't understand, and Marcus and Elena had spent weeks reassuring them that everything was okay. "Daddy seemed sad after we went to that fancy place," Isaiah had observed with his characteristic perception. Marcus had knelt to his eye level. "I was processing some old feelings, buddy. Sometimes we have to face hard things from our past. But I'm okay now. Better than okay." The truth was more complicated. Seeing Victoria's complete breakdown had affected Marcus more than he'd anticipated. Not because he still loved her, that love had died years ago, but because he recognized the depth of her pain. He'd wanted to feel vindicated, to feel that justice had been served. Instead, he mostly felt sad for the woman she'd become, the prison she'd built for herself out of fear and pride. "Do you regret going?" Elena asked one night after the boys were asleep. Marcus considered the question carefully. "No. I needed to close that chapter, to stand in my truth so completely that her lies couldn't touch it anymore. But I also saw something I wasn't expecting." "What's that?" "How much she was hurting, how broken she was by the same legacy that she wielded against me. It doesn't excuse what she did, but it explains it. And maybe there's a small part of me that hopes she finds healing." Elena took his hand. "That's why I love you. You have every right to hate her, and instead you hope for her healing. That's not weakness, Marcus. That's strength." When Victoria's letter arrived at the firm, Marcus stared at it for a long time before opening it. Elena stood beside him, ready to support whatever decision he made. He read it once, then again, then set it down. "She's trying," he said simply. "Are you going to respond?" Marcus shook his head slowly. "No. My forgiveness isn't something she needs from me. It's something she needs to give herself. Responding would just make her healing about me again, and it can't be. She needs to learn to stand on her own, to find worth that isn't dependent on my validation or anyone else's." "That's very wise," Elena said. "Or maybe I'm just done carrying her emotional burdens," Marcus admitted. "I did that for 8 years. I don't need to do it anymore." But he did keep the letter. He filed it away with other artifacts from his past. Not to dwell on, but to remember how far he'd come, how much he'd survived, how thoroughly the truth had vindicated him. The triplets continued to grow, each developing distinct personalities. Caleb, the serious one, had announced he wanted to be an architect like his daddy. Isaiah wanted to be a doctor like his mother. Elijah, the artist, was less sure. He just knew he wanted to make beautiful things that make people happy. Marcus's firm continued to flourish. The West Side Project had led to more contracts, more opportunities to design dignity into spaces that housed the marginalized. He'd been featured in Time magazine's 100 Most Influential People with a simple citation, "Marcus Johnson builds homes that honor humanity." One Sunday afternoon, 11 months after the wedding disaster, the Johnson family was at a community park. The boys were playing on the swings while Marcus and Elena sat on a bench, holding hands and watching their sons with the quiet contentment that comes from hard-won peace. "Daddy, Daddy, look how high I can go," Elijah shouted, pumping his legs with determination. "I see you, buddy. You're flying," Marcus called back. A woman approached the bench hesitantly. Marcus didn't recognize her at first. She was thinner, her hair unstyled, wearing jeans and a simple sweater. No designer clothes, no perfect makeup. Then their eyes met, and he realized. Victoria. Elena tensed beside him, her protective instincts immediately activated. But Marcus placed a gentle hand on her knee. "It's okay," he murmured. Victoria stopped a respectful distance away. "I'm sorry to intrude," she said, her voice quiet. "I was walking through the park and saw you. I didn't mean to. I'll go." "Wait," Marcus said, surprising himself. He stood, walking a few steps toward her while still maintaining distance. "How are you?" Victoria's laugh was self-deprecating. "That's a complicated question. Better than I was. Worse than I should be. Working on it. I got your letter." Her eyes widened slightly. "I didn't expect you to acknowledge it. I didn't expect anything." "I know," Marcus said. "That's why I'm mentioning it. The old Victoria would have expected a response, maybe even demanded one. The fact that you didn't, that tells me something." There was a long pause. Victoria's eyes drifted to the playground where the triplets were now playing tag, their laughter carrying across the grass. "They're beautiful," she said softly. "Your sons. They're beautiful. Thank you. I saw the Time magazine feature. Your work is remarkable. You're changing lives, Marcus. Real lives. You always wanted to do that." "Yes," he agreed simply. Victoria took a shaky breath. "I owe you so much more than an apology. I owe you years of your life back. I owe you the dignity I stripped away. But since I can't give you those things, I want you to know. I'm trying to earn the redemption I don't deserve. Not for you, for me, and for any other person I might have hurt if I'd continued being who I was." Marcus studied her face. The arrogance was gone. The brittleness had softened. She looked human in a way she never had during their marriage. Vulnerable, uncertain, but somehow more real. "Victoria," he said gently, "I hope you find peace. I genuinely do. Not because I need you to for my own healing. I've done that work. But because everyone deserves the chance to become better than they were." Tears slipped down Victoria's cheeks. "I don't know if I can ever forgive myself for what I did to you." "That's between you and yourself," Marcus replied. "But if you want my opinion, forgiveness isn't about forgetting or excusing. It's about releasing the weight so you can move forward. You have to decide if you want to carry that weight forever or if you want to set it down and build something new." Elena had approached quietly, standing beside her husband. She looked at Victoria, not with hatred, but with the clinical assessment of a doctor evaluating a patient. "Mrs. Ashford, are you getting help?" Professional help? Victoria nodded. Yes, therapy twice a week. It's hard, really hard. Good, Elena said firmly. Hard means you're doing the real work. Easy would mean you're still avoiding. Victoria's gaze shifted between them. This couple so clearly in love, so clearly united, so clearly everything she and Marcus had never been. He's lucky to have you, she said to Elena. No, Elena corrected, her voice kind but firm. I'm lucky to have him, and he's lucky to have me. That's how partnership works. Mutual fortune, mutual respect, no one keeping score. The words landed like a final lesson, and Victoria absorbed them with a nod of understanding. She took a step back, preparing to leave. Thank you for not being cruel. You would have had every right. Cruelty perpetuates cruelty, Marcus said. I decided a long time ago not to be part of that cycle. As Victoria walked away across the park, Caleb ran up to his father. Daddy, was that the sad lady from the wedding? Marcus lifted his son, settling him on his hip. Yes, buddy, that was her. Is she still sad? Yes, Marcus said honestly. But maybe a little less sad than before, and maybe, with time, she'll learn to be happy. I hope so, Caleb said with the simple compassion of a child. Everyone should get to be happy. Marcus hugged his son close, watching Victoria's figure grow smaller in the distance. She was walking with her head down, but her shoulders were a little straighter than they'd been at the wedding. It wasn't redemption, not yet, but it was movement, and maybe that was enough. Come on, Elena said, taking Marcus's free hand. Let's get ice cream. I think we've had enough heavy moments for one day. As they walked toward the ice cream truck, their 3 sons racing ahead, Marcus realized something profound. Victoria's pain was no longer his burden to carry. Her healing was not his responsibility. Her journey was her own. He had walked through fire and emerged whole. He had been called broken and proven complete. He had lost everything and rebuilt something better. And now, finally, he was free, not because Victoria had released him, but because he had released himself from the power her lies had once held. The truth had not just set him free, it had shown him who he'd always been. Enough, worthy, and whole. 2 years after the wedding that never was, Marcus Johnson stood at the podium of the National Architecture Convention in Washington, D.C., accepting the Humanitarian Design Award. The auditorium was packed with architects, city planners, and housing advocates from across the country. Behind him, projected on a massive screen, were images of his projects: the West Side Development, new affordable housing in Detroit, a community center in New Orleans that had become a model for post-disaster reconstruction. When I started Dignity Designs, Marcus said, his voice steady and clear, I had a simple belief that everyone, regardless of income, deserves to live in spaces that honor their humanity. That affordable doesn't have to mean ugly. That low income doesn't have to mean low dignity. He paused, looking out at the audience. But I learned something else along the way. I learned that the same principle applies to people. Everyone deserves to be seen for who they truly are, not defined by others' limitations or fears. The audience applauded, but Marcus wasn't finished. I'm standing here today not just as an architect, but as a man who was once told he was broken, who was blamed for something that wasn't his fault, who was cast aside when he became inconvenient to someone else's narrative. His voice grew stronger. And I want anyone listening who has experienced something similar to hear this. Other people's lies about you do not become your truth unless you accept them. You get to define yourself. The standing ovation lasted 3 minutes. Elena watched from the front row, the triplets beside her. Now 5 years old, dressed in matching blazers, Caleb trying to sit still while Isaiah whispered questions and Elijah drew in a notebook. After the ceremony, families and colleagues surrounded Marcus with congratulations. Later that evening in their hotel room, Marcus helped the boys into their pajamas while CNN played on low volume. Suddenly, Elena called from the living area, "Marcus, come see this." On the screen was a news segment, Victoria Ashford's remarkable transformation. The anchor explained how the former pharmaceutical CEO had spent the last 2 years working with nonprofits, had completed a master's degree in social work, and had just published a memoir titled The Weight of Legacy: How Family Expectations Nearly Destroyed Me. The segment showed recent footage of Victoria, simple clothing, minimal makeup, speaking at a conference about generational trauma and corporate culture. She looked different, softer somehow, but also stronger. "I wrote this book," Victoria was saying to the interviewer, "not to excuse my actions, but to examine how family dysfunction can perpetuate cycles of harm. I destroyed a good man because I was too afraid to face the truth about myself and my family's toxic legacy. That was my choice, my failure. But maybe by sharing that story, I can help others recognize these patterns before they cause similar destruction." Marcus watched in silence. The boys had climbed onto the couch beside him, sensing something important was happening even if they didn't understand it. "Is that the sad lady?" Isaiah asked. "Yes," Marcus replied. "She doesn't look as sad anymore," Caleb observed with his usual perceptiveness. The interviewer asked Victoria about her ex-husband. She took a visible breath before answering. "Marcus Johnson is a remarkable man who deserves so much better than what I gave him. I spent 8 years projecting my fears onto him, making him believe he was inadequate when the inadequacy was mine. He has since built an extraordinary life and family, and he did it despite the damage I caused. I don't expect his forgiveness. I don't deserve it, but I am profoundly grateful that he survived my cruelty and thrived." Elena muted the television. "How do you feel about that?" she asked Marcus. He considered the question carefully, aware that his sons were listening. "I feel glad for her, glad she's doing the work, but also removed from it, like watching a story about someone I used to know rather than someone who shaped my life." "Because she doesn't shape your life anymore," Elena said, understanding immediately. "Exactly. Her healing is important, but it's not about me. It's about her becoming someone who won't hurt the next person the way she hurt me." Caleb tugged on his father's sleeve. "Daddy, you always say hurt people hurt people. Is she not hurt anymore?" Marcus pulled his eldest son close. "She's probably still hurt, buddy, but she's learning not to pass that hurt on to others. That's the difference between staying broken and choosing to heal." The next morning brought unexpected news. Marcus's phone rang while he was ordering breakfast, an unknown Atlanta number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. "Marcus, it's Victoria. Please don't hang up." He gestured to Elena, who immediately came to his side. "Victoria, I saw your interview last night. That's actually why I'm calling." Her voice was tentative, nothing like the commanding tone she'd once used. "My book is being released next week, and my publisher arranged a book tour. One of the stops is Atlanta, and I wanted to tell you directly rather than you hearing it from someone else. I'm not trying to invade your life or—" "Victoria," Marcus interrupted gently. "You're allowed to be in Atlanta. It's a big city. You're allowed to rebuild your life. You don't need my permission." There was a long pause. "Actually, there's something else. The book's proceeds are going to a foundation I'm establishing. It will provide free fertility testing and counseling for couples, particularly those from communities where such resources are scarce. And Marcus, I'm naming it the Johnson Family Foundation, if you'll allow it. Not to assuage my guilt, but because you and your family represent the truth I tried to deny. 3 beautiful boys who proved everything I said was a lie." Marcus closed his eyes, processing this. "Victoria, I appreciate the gesture, but using my family name feels—" I understand, she said quickly. I can call it something else. I just wanted you to know that the money from my story, from the harm I caused, will go toward helping others avoid similar pain. Couples will get tested together. No one will be blamed without evidence. No one will carry shame that isn't theirs. Elena leaned close to the phone. This is Elena, Victoria. That's a worthy cause. But Marcus is right. Using the family name ties us to your redemption arc in a way that isn't fair to us. What if you called it the Truth and Dignity Foundation? That honors what you've learned without making it about specific people. That's perfect, Victoria said, her voice thick with emotion. Thank you both. For everything. For basic human decency when I deserved none. After the call ended, Marcus sat on the hotel bed, his head in his hands. Elena sat beside him, rubbing his back. You okay? I'm okay, he said slowly. It's just surreal. 2 years ago, she was destroying me in that ballroom. Now she's building a foundation to prevent others from experiencing what we went through. People really can change. Some people can, Elena corrected. The ones willing to do the hard, humbling work. Not everyone is. The book tour came and went. Victoria's memoir received mixed reviews. Some praised her honesty, others criticized her for profiting from her own bad behavior. But the Truth and Dignity Foundation launched successfully, and within months it had provided free fertility counseling to over 200 couples. Marcus followed these developments from a distance, the way you might follow news about a natural disaster in a place you once lived. Concerned, but no longer personally affected. His life continued in its joyful rhythm, morning chaos with the triplets, days spent designing spaces that honored humanity, evenings filled with family dinners and bedtime stories. One Saturday afternoon, 3 years after the aborted wedding, Marcus was teaching the boys to ride bikes in their neighborhood park. Caleb had mastered it quickly, Isaiah was cautious but determined, and Elijah kept getting distracted by butterflies. Elena was photographing every moment, laughing as Elijah crashed gently into a bush while chasing a monarch butterfly. A familiar figure approached across the grass. Victoria, accompanied by a woman Marcus didn't recognize. She waved tentatively, and Marcus nodded, signaling it was okay to approach. The boys, focused on their bikes, didn't notice. "I'm sorry to interrupt your family time," Victoria said when she reached them. "This is Dr. Chen, my therapist. We were walking and I saw you. I wanted to introduce you. She's been crucial to my healing." Dr. Chen, a woman in her 60s with kind eyes, extended her hand. "Mr. Johnson, Mrs. Johnson, Victoria has told me a great deal about you. I want you to know that the work she's doing is genuine. I've been a therapist for 35 years, and I've seen many people attempt to change. Victoria is one of the few who has truly committed to the process." "That's good to hear," Elena said diplomatically. Victoria watched the boys cycling in loops, her expression wistful. "They're so big now, growing up so fast." "They are," Marcus agreed. There was an awkward pause. Then Victoria said, "I met someone, through the foundation work. His name is David. He's a counselor who works with trauma survivors. He knows everything, about you, about what I did, all of it. And he's helping me understand that redemption isn't about erasing the past. It's about building a future that honors the lessons learned from it." "I'm glad for you," Marcus said, and he meant it, not with the passion of someone who still cared deeply, but with the distant goodwill of someone who had truly moved on. Victoria turned to leave, then paused. "Marcus, one more thing. In all my therapy, all my reading, all my work, I learned that the opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference. And I think we've reached that. You're indifferent to me now, and that's exactly as it should be." Marcus considered this. "You're right. I don't hate you, Victoria. I don't love you. I don't think about you unless directly confronted with you. You're part of my history, but you're not part of my present or my future. And that's not cruelty. That's healing. I know, Victoria said softly, and I'm grateful for it. It means I no longer have the power to hurt you. That's the greatest gift I could give at this point, my own irrelevance to your happiness. She walked away with Dr. Chen, and Elena wrapped her arm around Marcus's waist. That was remarkably mature of you both. It was honest, Marcus replied, and honesty was what was missing all along. Elijah crashed his bike again, this time into his brother's, and all three boys ended up in a giggling pile on the grass. Marcus and Elena rushed over, checking for injuries, finding only laughter. As they helped the boys up, dusting them off, Marcus realized something profound. This was his life now, not defined by what had been taken from him, but by what he'd built in the aftermath. That evening, after the boys were asleep, Marcus and Elena sat on their back porch, the Atlanta night warm around them. Elena leaned against his shoulder. Do you ever wonder what your life would have been like if Victoria had been honest from the beginning? If you'd faced the fertility issues together? Marcus thought about it carefully. Sometimes. But then I think, would I have these specific sons? Would I have found you? Every path leads somewhere different, and I happen to love where this one led. Even though it went through pain? Especially because it went through pain, Marcus said. Because that pain taught me things I needed to know, that I am enough, that I can survive being broken and come back whole. That truth always surfaces eventually, and when it does, it sets everyone free, even the person who was lying. Elena lifted her head to look at him. You know what I love most about you? You could have become bitter. You had every right to. Instead, you became better. I had help, Marcus said, kissing her forehead. I had you. I had Tyrone. I had Dr. Martinez when I needed medical truth. I had your father's investment. I had our sons. No one heals alone, Elena. Community heals us. Love heals us. Truth heals us. Inside, one of the boys called out, a nightmare, perhaps, or just needing reassurance. Marcus stood, but Elena pulled him back for one more moment. Before you go, I want you to know something. I'm proud of you, not for your awards or your success, but for how you've walked through this fire and come out with your compassion intact. That's the real achievement. Marcus smiled, squeezing her hand. Come on. Let's go see which one needs us. They walked inside together, toward the sound of their child's voice, toward the life they'd built on foundations of truth and dignity. Behind them, the Atlanta night settled into stillness, holding the stories of all who lived beneath it, those still struggling with their lies, those learning to walk in truth, and those who had finally found peace in the simple, profound act of being authentically themselves. The past had happened, the pain had been real, but the present was full of love, and the future stretched ahead like an open road, no longer haunted by ghosts of shame or lies. Marcus Johnson had been called broken. He had been blamed, discarded, and nearly destroyed. But in the end, he had been vindicated not by revenge, but by the simple act of living well, of loving deeply, of building something beautiful from the rubble of what had been torn down. And that, more than any award or recognition, was the truest measure of his worth, a worth that had always been there, waiting for the moment when he would finally claim it for himself. Message to audience. 200 words. Dear friends, Marcus Johnson's story reminds us of a profound truth that becomes clearer as we journey through life. We are never defined by someone else's judgment of us. How many of us have carried shame that wasn't ours to carry? How many years did we spend believing we were not enough because someone we loved told us so? Marcus was called broken for 8 years, blamed for something that was never his fault, and yet he chose to seek truth rather than accept lies. His story teaches us that it's never too late to discover who we really are beneath the labels others have placed on us. Whether you're 55 or 75, whether you're healing from divorce, loss, or years of feeling inadequate, your worth was never determined by those who couldn't see it. Like Marcus, you have the power to rewrite your story, to build something beautiful from the ashes, to prove that the second half of life can be your most authentic chapter. The question isn't whether you've been hurt. The question is, will you let that hurt define you? Or will you, like Marcus, choose to define yourself? Discussion. Questions. Have you ever been blamed for something that wasn't your fault? How did you find the strength to move forward and reclaim your truth? What's one lie about yourself that you believed for too long, and what finally helped you see the truth? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Let's support each other in our journeys toward healing and self-discovery.